Hey everybody, today I'm going to be talking about just some movies that I have watched over the last several months. I don't actually review every single thing that I see because that would be quite daunting. Of course, if it's a new movie, I will most likely review it, but if it's like an old movie, a classic that I watched, maybe I haven't reviewed it, I'll just save it for these little wrap-ups here. But I have actually gone through and revisited some old classics from my childhood that are very nostalgic, and actually some classics from my time that I had actually never seen, so that was interesting. But I'm going to start with the film Contact. This film came out in, I think, 1997, and it was directed by Robert Zemeckis. This film, as a child, I watched this over and over and over and over and over again. I hadn't seen it in many, many years, and I thought it would just be kind of fun to watch it. I didn't really know what to expect at all. I'm not the biggest Zemeckis fan. He's one of those people who I think he does extraordinary sequences, and then he'll follow it up with something that just doesn't really work. In a lot of his movies, I'll pick out very cinematic moments and some really good scenes and often some really good concepts, but it's not quite coming together. There's major unevenness, at least in my opinion. And I guess with Contact, it was an important film because it came after Forrest Gump, or it was the film that he made directly after Forrest Gump, which, obviously that film had a lot of critical acclaim, so a lot of eyes are on this. But I do feel like watching this film, Contact, it kind of sums up a lot of how I feel about Robert Zemeckis, just in the sense that, I can sense he's going for something that is more grounded in a sense of reality, and he has some ideas. Some of them, could be thought-provoking even, if they were handled with any sort of maturity. But often those are sidelined in order to make room for something just really utterly ridiculous. Some ridiculous plot point, something that is just completely illogical. And yeah, I don't know. To me, that is very reminiscent of a lot of 90s kind of sci-fi at the time. A lot of it was just really schmaltzy and more kind of driven to the blockbuster type of thing. You're more likely to see something that is science fiction if it's going to be like Independence Day. And yes, I think this film is going more for something that is thought-provoking, perhaps more cerebral in tone. But yeah, it does. It feels a lot more like a Roland Emmerich film. That said, I think there is some genuinely really, really good filmmaking in this. There is an amazing shot towards the beginning of the film, and I think a lot of people know what I'm talking about. It is in a flashback sequence during the father's heart attack. That's a really, really well done scene. And just that one particular shot where she's running in slow motion, though I think, overall, just like how it's composed, and then of course where she's running in slow motion down the hallway, the way that is orchestrated, I think is really, really clever, even though, it's a tad bit on the nose, a little bit too schmaltzy, a little bit Robert Zemeckis in tone, but overall, just a very, very cool shot. And I also really like, I've always loved this sequence where they first make contact with the aliens. I just love the tension of it, and just like there's this buzz in the air, not knowing, what's on the other side type of thing. This really gives you a feeling of the unknown, and it really delays that very well. And you really don't get, again, that kind of cinematic tension building, I think, where you're really, really grounded in the moment. And I do think it is interesting that we have a sci-fi film like this that is more dedicated to kind of the way people perceive things at the time, more kind of how it's filtered through the culture, through the media in particular. Religious propaganda, government-sponsored, science organizations and such. And then only in the third act, finally, when we get to the third act, it's like that kite is snipped and it's like, whoa, we are plunged into the unknown, and it's very jarring in a way that I find quite pleasant. But the whole release into the wormhole where Jodie Foster is going into that, I just think that's awesome, and it holds up really, really well. Also, the opening shot of the film is a very, very cool one. And yeah, I don't know, I like a lot of different things about that. And those are scenes that, I do revisit. But again, a lot of that is just more, when you watch the scenes out of context, they're just really, really compelling. But once you watch the entire film, it kind of sucks. Jodie Foster is basically playing a Clarice Starling knockoff, which is, a character, an archetype that obviously worked out very well for her. But I find the writing here, especially when it pertains to her and just, the whole concepts overall, I just find the whole thing, cheap and lame, and, everything is reduced basically to religious guilt, which of course it was something more prominent in the 1990s, and that's fine. I think that's a very interesting topic to explore, but this isn't really explored. It's just kind of, ham-fisted and one-dimensional. It feels like the film hates the main character, or is out to sabotage her in a certain way, without giving us any real compelling arguments from her point of view or from their point of view. And, it's just constantly kind of berating her for not believing in God in very crucial moments where it matters for her character. And obviously that is very realistic in the sense of, you're interviewing potential presidential nominees or something. Obviously you ask them about their religion. That is a very common sort of thing, but this just felt very much narrow. And I'm really not sure ultimately what we're supposed to gain from any of it, because then you have the actual extraterrestrial stuff and it turns out to be just a giant jerk off where they walk away empty-handed despite all the hullabaloo. So it's just it feels like a very anticlimactic type of film, and it is often bordering on farce, which can be quite entertaining, but I think unintentionally. Matthew McConaughey is a revelation in this film. He's one of the most hilarious characters. And I don't even know if you can really call him a character. I'm not really sure what he is, but it's like he has superpowers. It's like he can move through walls. I swear, no matter where they are in this movie, whether they are at the mall, whether they are in the Oval Office at the White House, we'll say, I swear, he can get into every single place. And it's like he's a priest, and it's like, how does he have like government clearance? How is he able to go to all of these things? He could just walk into like top secret meetings like they're nothing. He gets interviewed, for like CNN. It was just hilarious. At a certain point, I really thought it was some sort of magical realism, that he's more meant to be a symbol and not a person. And that still does cross my mind, but I don't know. I think it's really funny the way people talk about that particular character. Next, I'm going to talk about The Thin Man, which is a film that I really like. I've seen it, several times, but I watched it recently with my dad on the Criterion channel. And, I just really love films that are pre-code Hollywood. This film obviously came out in 1934. And I don't know, it's just way more interesting. It's way less watered down than like the 1940s for me. And I had forgotten just how dark this film is and how clever it is. It has a really sardonic sense of humor. And again, there's something about that dark seediness of those early films where all the stuff that's like in the dark shadows gets brought to the forefront, I find deeply compelling. And certainly it does fit the times. There is just this real cynicism, but everything is also very posh and very elegant, obviously. I think that, Loy and Powell, just as a couple, they are so brilliant together. This is back when movie stars had this absolutely amazing, palpable sexual chemistry. It just oozed. You didn't need sex scenes. I love the way they play off of each other. I love that she is so elegant and poised, and she can really have fun with the guys. She'll do all the shots along with her husband, but she will pay for it later, and he will make fun of her. And all of that stuff I think is really great. And he, by contrast, is really wonderful because, I don't know, he has something a little bit goofy about him in some ways, but he's also a little rougher. She's clearly more high society. And I think that's important, that contrast between that high society she represents and then him more the proletariat, because obviously we're seeing a lot of that in the film. It's like they have this perspective of the rich and they're looking at all of these people who are very lonely and very drunk and very sad. And Nora and Nick are just very curious, obviously, about this seedy underbelly that I talk about and about everyday life of these people. And yet they're also very distant from it. There's that disconnect that's very important, a bird's eye view. Myrna Loy in this film is elegant, but she's also, a bit down to earth, and she just oozes confidence. She has the security in herself. And I don't know, in films today, if that were the case, it would be used, to prove something, like as if it's a statement, whereas here, it just kind of exists. This isn't being funneled into some sort of ham-fisted point, it just colors the atmosphere of the experience. And yeah, I'm sorry, that's just more mature to me, and I miss the dark shit. And then I'm going to talk about a big classic that I admit I had never seen, but I swear to God, as I was watching it, I had nearly all of it memorized because it's so famous. I've seen so many scenes from it that, at this point, it's almost as if I had seen the whole film. But I am talking about Office Space. This film came out in 1999, and yeah, I mean, it was fun. I find this particular era for big Hollywood movies to be very interesting, and I talk about that a lot. Obviously, 1999 produced a lot of very interesting things when it comes to like the sedentary world and representing that. Gone are the days of the pot-smoking hippies, and now we have like the out-of-shape dad who's working the 9-to-5 job. And we see this reflected in, obviously The Sopranos, and we see this feeling of like the cubicle lifestyle in The Matrix, and we see it in Fight Club, American Beauty, and, obviously in Office Space as well. And even though the ideas in this film could potentially be very serious and very dark, because honestly, I think that they found a way to keep it very light. There's a nice relatability to it. And I think part of it is because these jobs, I used to work a corporate job. I've worked jobs like this in the past, and they really haven't changed that much. I mean, 1999 to, like maybe 20 years later, it's not that different. There's still a lot of operating on ancient technology, like fax machines and things like that, which I was quite surprised by. And I like that the film has this particular type of feeling where it's like the revolutionary attempts at gaining back your personal identity, your personal autonomy, if you even had it in the first place. It feels very urgent, very pressing, and yet it's stagnant and lazy. And that is the world they're trying to portray in the 1990s. It's very like, yes, we will go organize that strike, but after this episode of Matlock. So I like that it's constantly pulling in two different directions. You have the humorous and the claustrophobic. The morals are very clear and straightforward, and they are, as I said, very universal. And I kind of enjoy that kind of existential area with which our main characters here are navigating the narrative. I do wish there had been maybe a little bit more urgency, particularly in the climax and, just mainly in the third act of the film, I think. There is just a certain thinness just to the whole experience. It feels like, like a skit that was, stretched out to be able to equal a feature film. And it feels just slightly undercooked, and it might just be, my own personal taste. Maybe I wanted something to be a little bit more bold, push a little bit further, but at the same time, like that hamster wheel circadian rhythm, that repetition, that feeling is the point of it too. But yeah, I know I'm like one of the only people in the world who had never seen Office Space, but if you haven't, if you're like me, it's delightful. It's worth your time. But yeah, so those are just a few movies that I've seen. And again, I will do another one of these when I gather another pile. But that is the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website. As always, it is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. And if that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are wonderful. Guys, thank you so much for your support, and welcome to the new members. As always, if you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.